Good morning, everyone. We have plenty of wonderful conversation in the studio. I just ask everyone to take a seat so we can get the conversation started today. Good morning, everyone. I am Matt Ewalt. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us in person here at the Tribune's 919 studio in downtown Austin, and those joining us around the state for a conversation about the future of public media here in Texas. Our program today will run an hour with 15 minutes for your questions. We want to get to as many of your questions as possible. Our in-person and online audience can submit questions through our Q&A portal. That's at texastribune.org/ask. texastribune.org/ask. And for those in person, you'll also find some signage in the back with a QR code that you can use. And if you're old school and want to use a note card, I'm happy to bring one to you so you can ask your question that way. We want to thank all of those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. Just a quick, for our in-person audience, a quick show of hands for those here in Austin who are members of the Texas Tribune. Just want to acknowledge you and your support. To learn more and to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. In 2 months, we will convene here in downtown Austin for the Texas Tribune Festival. We invite you to step inside the conversation shaping the future of education, the economy, healthcare, energy, technology, culture and the arts, and public media. With those driving decisions in Texas and across the nation, you can learn more and purchase tickets at tribfest.org. Now let's get to today's conversation by meeting our panelists. Julie Grimes has served as general manager of the Amarillo-based Panhandle PBS since 2023, serves all of the Panhandle 26 counties, if I'm correct. All right. She previously served as the owner and operator of her own company called Black Sheep Kitchen, and her career includes more than 10 years working as a senior food editor for Southern Living and Cooking Light magazines. Corey McLagan begins her work as executive editor of KUT News and the Texas Newsroom on September 1st or after the holiday, leading journalism strategy across both newsrooms, working closely with editors to strengthen editorial innovation, drive collaboration, and expand the audience across platforms. She also had joined, she was also with the Texas Tribune in a number of capacities. Luis Patino, president and CEO of Austin PBS, oversees the organization that informs, entertains, and bridges communities in Central Texas and beyond. He most recently served as president and general manager of Univision Media Group in Los Angeles. Moderating our conversation today is Texas Tribune editor-in-chief Matthew Watkins. He's been with the Tribune in various leadership roles for a number of years and began his duties as editor-in-chief this fall. I thank our audience and our panelists for joining us today, and with that, I turn the program over to Matthew.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for that introduction. Thank you to our panelists for being here, and thanks for everyone joining us in the room and online. A lot to talk about. It's been a busy time for all of y'all this summer. I want to start first. I know that public media does more than journalism, right? And I want to talk about all of that and the services y'all provide for your communities. But it does feel to me that what has gotten us to this place where we are with cuts, and being targeted by the federal government is a lot of conversation around the journalism. And so, Corey, I want to start with you as someone who works with public media journalists from around the state. Full disclosure, of course, Corey, prior to doing that, worked for a long time at the Texas Tribune and was, for a time, my boss. So feels important
to expose that.
You did a great job. Thank you. And I'm very excited that the tables have turned and now I can be grilling you. But you, like I said, you work with newsrooms around the state. You will be, leading the KUT newsroom here starting next month. Talk to me a little bit about kind of what you view as the sort of journalistic philosophy for these public media stations, all the ones that you work for around the state, and the value that you feel you're bringing to the state by doing that work.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great to be here. So the Texas Newsroom is the collaboration of all the NPR stations in Texas. So we have 4 lead stations, which are the big stations in Texas: KUT here in Austin. Any KUT listeners in the audience, by the way? Okay. Texas Public Radio in San Antonio, Houston Public Media, and KERA in North Texas. And then we have these wonderful smaller stations around the state, whether it's KTEP in El Paso, KWBU in Waco, a bunch around the state. And we all try to work together to leverage our resources to tell stories almost as if we were one newsroom. And so when big news happens in Texas, which is all the time, we are there. So if it's the floods in Kerrville, if it's the shooting in Uvalde, if it's the wildfires in the Panhandle, or the legislative sessions that never seem to end, we are there, and we're telling those stories on the radio, online, on social media. They are free. They are for everyone. They're accessible to everyone. And each of these stations is really doing critical work in their communities. So here in Austin, we have this amazing transportation reporter named Nathan Bernier, and he just won a national Murrow Award for his reporting on what is being done at the Austin airport to keep it safe after there was a near miss where 2 planes almost collided. So really important work. And then beyond just the journalism, which of course is so important, these stations are community connectors. There is something magic about what public media does for its communities that is beyond the news. And so you take Marfa Public Radio, which is this gem of a station in far west Texas, and they cover like 30,000 square miles. Far west Texas, the Big Bend region, the Permian Basin, and they do important news reporting and they're important lifeline in emergencies and all of that. But they also have this thing called the Love Drive. And so on Valentine's Day, you can write in or call in and with a love message to your loved one, and they will read it on the air, and they will postmark your message from Valentine, Texas, and mail it to. These are really these stations are connecting community members. And then just the last thing I want to mention is just the role in emergencies. So this is really essential. So you think about the 2021 winter storm here in Texas, and we know that people told us that at KUT that KUT was the way that they were able to get information when the power went out. They maybe didn't have access to the internet or to television, and they could get the radio in their car, or maybe they had a battery-operated radio. And so, of course, we're providing news in all the modern ways, digitally, online, email newsletters, all of that. But in emergency situations, radio can be very important.
Yeah. Julie, this has really come up, this emergency service area has really been a big matter of discussion for rural areas. You mentioned you have 26 panhandle counties kind of in your coverage area. Fewer media options out there than a lot of different places in the state. Can you talk a little bit about the role you see your organization playing?
Absolutely. Thank you. Also, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So, although our station is based in Amarillo, which is considered more of the non-rural part of the Texas Panhandle, we serve the 26 counties of the Texas Panhandle, which are heavily rural. And I think that's important to note because we live in areas where, for instance, we've done a couple of projects this year, which most of you will be able to see statewide soon, but one of them is called Broken.
Public media has really valued and had intentional programs around internships. At Austin PBS, we have anywhere from 10 to 12 interns from across the state that come in and are part of this really amazing program where they get to work with production, with the underwriting team, with the data services team. And these are our future broadcasters, our future media engineers and technicians. And that's the kind of work that we are very intentional about, that we support, and that I think allows us to also, from a workforce development point of view, develop a pipeline of future employees in what is turning out to be in Texas a very important industry.
Corey, I mean, it's no secret that one of the maybe the driving reason that you saw this defunding of public broadcasting was a perception among people and, you know, the Republican leaders in Congress, in the White House, that public media news coverage was too liberal, right? I mean, Brandon Gill, a Texas congressman, called the cuts an attempt to, quote, defund left-wing state-sponsored outlets. I'm curious, what do you think? I mean, you know, there is that sort of stereotype of the NPR listeners, the tote bag carrying, you know, Volvo driving, you know, individual. Do you believe in that stereotype? And just could you talk a little bit about just like the idea, you know, the ethics and the approach that you take to your journalism? Do you think there's any truth to that, you know, leaning left argument that that folks have made?
So look, public media is for everyone, right? And we are nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, we tell the story right down the middle, you know, just like we did here together at the Texas Tribune. We interview all sides, we're covering the legislature. We always think we don't have any sort of agenda of you know, how we're gonna cover it. So, you know, I would challenge people to listen to our coverage and decide, and what I think you'll hear is really balanced coverage of the news of the day, including of politics, that doesn't have any agenda. And look, public media has had bipartisan support for decades. And when you know, President Johnson signed the Public Broadcast Act, you know, he talked about enlightenment for all, and that this was going to be for everyone, and has really enjoyed support from Republicans and Democrats over all these years. So we approach our coverage with fairness and not with an agenda, and it's for everyone. And maybe they carry more tote bags than other people, our listeners, but that's
nothing liberal
okay.
about a tote bag.
Nothing liberal about a tote bag.
All right, yeah. So, okay, of course, let's just take a step back and just recount what has actually happened here. You know, on July 24th, Donald Trump signed a bill that canceled around, I believe, $1.1 billion in funding that had been approved for public broadcasting. About a week later, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, where that funding sort of passes through and is delivered to the stations, announced that it was shutting down at the end of the fiscal year. I think September 1st is that last day. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, how much and what different kinds of stations, how they'll be affected by that. Julie, I'll start with you, because I know, again, a lot of the focus has been on the more rural stations. How much of a existential threat is what has happened to your station? What is it going, I mean, how much danger is just the continued operation of your organization due to what happened in July?
So I know that what you hear in the media is that rural stations are most at risk in the rescissions package going through. So just to kind of put that into context, I know we've got a lot of public media consumers in the audience, so you guys probably know this. But rural stations are more dependent on federal funding than traditionally more urban stations are. So for instance, in my station in Amarillo, about 30% of our budget comes from federal funds. So that's what we mean when we say that rural stations are more vulnerable, because we just have a bigger gap to fill. So to answer your question, how existential of a crisis is this? I can really only speak to my station. I can say that, you know, obviously this is not the outcome that we wanted, but it's the one that we have to deal with. So we're very forward-facing. I am super thankful for guys like Luis sitting here next to me, who is kind of spearheading a project with Texas PBS, which is an organization where all 10 Texas PBS stations across the state work cooperatively. It's something that's been in effect for years. And, fortunately, we kind of found our groove about a year or two ago, working together to bring more content, to bring stories from Amarillo to people across the state, for instance, to drive revenue that benefits all the stations. So I think that's a real position of strength that all of us here in Texas have, is that we're working collectively. And it's not just PBS stations working together as a whole. I'm talking with folks in our area. We've got the Amarillo Tribune. And so I'm talking with Jackie at the Amarillo Tribune. What are ways that we can collaborate? So I definitely think that a very collaborative spirit is going to be part of the answer. And then I also think that, we're going to need to remind you, the public, our viewers, our supporters, that public media it's your station. It's not my station. I just happen to have the honor and the privilege of leading at one station in Amarillo, but it's the people's station, and so we need the people to support the work we're doing and help us affirm our value in our communities. And so I definitely see a path forward. I'm very optimistic. And I think there's going to be strength in numbers.
Ballpark, what's your annual budget?
Well, we're looking to make up $1 million gap.
$1 million gap. Okay. And annually, right. I mean, one of the big issues here is that it's not just a one-time thing. It's something you counted on every single year, essentially. Is the reason that the rural stations tend to rely more on this just a population issue? You have smaller fundraising bases and often less wealth to draw from the community? Is that largely what it is?
Again, I mean, I can speak only, probably educated on my station, but I think in general the thinking is that yes, it's so. Although we serve 26 counties in the Texas Panhandle, that is a population of about 400,000 households. So, compare that to, say, Dallas or Austin. It is smaller population base to draw from. So fundraising is just more challenging in the era that we live in. We need to make sure, in our area, we operate off of one transmitter tower, but also 4 translators. So there's a vast network of equipment to maintain. There are expenses involved in that. So it's kind of a mix of things that make us more reliant on that federal funding. But at the heart, it does have to do with population and the ability to fundraise in those smaller markets.
Luis, what kind of impact are y'all looking at Austin PBS?
It's close to $3 million for us annually.
Out of a budget of how much?
Of about 20.
Okay.
So it's about a little bit over, close to 12%. Annually. And a portion of that I might mention, because I think this is important to the earlier question you asked me about education, is that part of that, close to $3 million, was from the U.S. Department of Education. So PBS as a whole also lost funding for a lot of our educational content and services. And that was the first to go. And I think that was about $30 million for the whole country. So in our particular case, it was close to 400,000 of that 3. So it's significant. I tell people all the time when they ask me, oh, well, what does that mean? I don't know. If anybody was to take away 10% of your budget, doesn't matter what kind of business you run, you probably have to do things a little bit differently afterwards. So significant.
Corey, what's the situation at KUT?
Yeah, so it really varies from station to station. At KUT specifically, it's a 6% gap, about $1.2 million a year. Houston Public Media, it's like 10%. But then some of those more rural stations, Marfa, it's like a third of their budget. And then at KWBU in Waco, for example, they're actually looking at a gap of like 56% because only a portion of that is this loss of the CPB funds, but they also recently lost some money from Baylor. So they are fighting for their lives right there. But I'm also optimistic, and I also think like you about collaboration. And we're already with the Texas Newsroom. We do 6 live newscasts every day that go out to like 30 stations. We have a show called Texas Standard, the national daily news show of Texas, that also goes out to stations all around the state. So we're already collaborating on the news, and this is forcing us to think, how else can we collaborate? What else can we do? It's forcing us to be innovative, and I think public media is still going to be here, and we're still going to do this really important work. It might look a little different, and we're going to get creative on on different solutions. I know some of the stations are looking at an event strategy, for example.
Luis, I'll ask you this first. I mean, how much, there has certainly been a rallying of public media watchers and listeners, right? And, speaking up and saying that this work is valuable, we want to support it. Has that borne out financially in any ways? Has there been any kind of fundraising boost from this? And to what extent, if at all, does that help make up for the losses that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think the community support has really come out and been quite vocal, both with their pocketbook and even just in terms of overall support, sending emails, sending messages, telling us how much they value their public media in markets like Austin. So yeah, I would tell you that the day after the federal funding went away, I think all of public media, whether you were an NPR station or a PBS station, saw an immediate response to that from the public. In our particular case, did we raise $3 million? No. But, we did a significant fundraise most recently with our pledge drive. We've also had other types of music fundraisers, which we just had one last week, which was sort of unique to us because of sort of how much we do in the music space. And then I think what's been most interesting to me is people who have really come out to say, well, that's great. There's gap funding, which is fine, but that's not sustainable, right? So the conversations that interest me the most are the ones around, okay, well, what are we going to do to really leverage this moment and take advantage of potential innovation and really dive into a more digital-first mentality around what we do, and not just think of ourselves as TV stations and radio stations, but sort of platform-agnostic media organizations that are mission and purpose-driven. To me, that's what's really exciting, because I do think that through these collaborations, whether it's the Texas Newsroom or Texas PBS, we have the opportunity to actually grow. In the case of Austin, we most recently were awarded the broadcast license for Waco. So we're right now, together with our board of directors, actually exploring an expansion into the Waco market to relaunch Waco PBS. So you heard it here first. And we're really excited about that, and maybe there's an opportunity to partner with that NPR station that is suffering and struggling because of a lack of funding. Maybe there's an opportunity to partner with the Texas Tribune and The Bridge, which you all just recently launched, because that's the other thing. I think strategic partnerships are going to be key to our success. There's no reason why we should launch Waco PBS and not be holding hands with Texas Tribune, The Bridge, the NPR station, right? To me, that's sort of the perfect trifecta of local public media in a marketplace.
That's great, and I agree that, collaboration being a big key here. I mean, Julie, y'all hosted all the Texas PBS stations across the state recently to kind of talk through how would you describe sort of the tenor of that conversation? What were some of the ideas and moods that were expressed there?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I mentioned earlier the Texas PBS group. We've been working together for, I don't know, a while. It predates both of us. So this was the first time that Amarillo hosted the meeting, and it was exciting to show folks, kind of the high plains, and we went out to Paladuro Canyon, and we saw Texas the Musical. It's over for this summer, but make sure to make your way out there next year to see it. It was great I think it's always good for all of us to get outside of our home turf and comfort zone and come together in a space where, we can focus just on collaborative work. And that's what happened at this meeting. It was the first week in August, I believe, is when it was. So we were fairly fresh off of the news of the rescissions package passing. I think I know that I can say for myself, we were still sort of casting about to know what our future looks like. And I felt like it was a really defining moment for us to come together and recognize the power that we have as a group of Texas PBS stations to work collectively, to go out and reimagine the way that we all do our work in each of our shops, to how can we collaborate for shared services. There was just a real, it's a very public media spirit of community that we had together. It was very uplifting and very encouraging to see that we're all working for a common goal of, the survival of public media in general. We want to be sure that we have coverage across the entire state of Texas. And like Luis mentioned, we're not content to just status quo with what we have now. We want to expand and grow and, continue telling the amazing stories that are happening here in the state of Texas.
That's great. I do have to ask, though, for any organization, as you mentioned, a 10%, a 30% cut, 12% cut, that is going to have an impact, right? It's hard decisions are going to have to be made, and I wonder, we know yet? I'll start with you, Corey, but I'm interested in hearing all of you. Like, do we know what's going to be lost because of this? Have those decisions been made? When do those decisions need to be made if they haven't already?
There's a lot of unknowns still, so it has not been sorted out. To answer your question, there are stations that are right now doing hiring freezes. It's kind of a wait and see. I know there's a lot of concern that the rural stations have about their broadcast equipment. What is going to happen to the towers and the antennas and the receivers that get bombarded by the Texas sun and the wind and need maintenance to make sure that they can reach those rural communities? Are they going to have the money to do that? I know people are just taking a real hard look at their budgets and where can they save. These are already very lean nonprofit organizations that don't have a lot of room to cut, but they are looking hard at their budgets, and then also looking for areas where they can bring in revenue and sort of change how they do business. So it's not settled yet, but everyone's kind of taking a hard look at what needs to happen.
I would also just mention, as sort of a reminder, that this didn't just happen overnight. It's not like when the rescission happened, we were all shocked, right? We were disappointed, certainly, but it wasn't something that, we weren't reading the room on, right? This was a long time coming. And I think a lot of us were very strategic in even our 2024, 2025 budgets, knowing that this could be a possibility to prepare. And I think to Corey's point, we're not very, fat organizations where all of a sudden you can, just cut your way to success. That is not the way we're looking at it. We think that there's innovation in around revenue opportunities. We think that by partnering together and sort of leveraging our resources, there's an ability to sort of maybe scale back in some of these areas where you can cut sort of back office infrastructure. Think of the shared service model. So I think you're going to start to see a combination of some expense reductions in areas that don't affect our public work and our community work. I think you'll hear from all of us that we will defend to the very bitter end our work in education, our work in community impact, our mission and purpose work will be defended at the utmost, and that includes content and services. So I think you will see some scaling back on areas where we feel that it's not as consumer forward. And then I think the real opportunity comes around revenue innovation, right? And that will continue to be some of the more traditional philanthropic means, but there's also an opportunity for us to really lean into regional underwriting and corporate sponsorships, which we hadn't really done a really good job on. And the Texas PBS team has really shown us that through intentionality, through sort of removing some barriers and hurdles and hiring the right people that have the right skill set, we've actually been able to grow our regional statewide corporate sponsorship really significantly, just by having a really robust strategy around that. So I think there's opportunities around events as well, experiences. So I'm really bullish on the revenue side of the opportunity, because again, having been in the private sector, I'll be the first one to tell you, you just can't cut your way to success.
Julia, how do you think Panhandle PBS will be different a year from now, say?
It's hard to say at this point. I mean, there are many unknowns at the moment. I would like to start with a statement that may be counterintuitive to a lot of folks. Public media stations are very physically conservative. We are accustomed to getting a lot of mileage off of a very few dollars. We're accustomed to, it's not like we took those federal funds and, we would multiply those in each market. That's kind of the formula that public media has been built on. So, due to conservative stewardship of funding and so forth, I feel like we've got a little bit of a luxury that we have some runway to be able to really strategically plan what our future is going to look like. In the near term, I don't see there having to be any big cuts. But as Luis said, I'm very committed to our employees at Panhandle PBS. We have 13 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, and we're cranking out 2 and 3 documentaries per year. We are involved with Region 16 education, teachers, homeschoolers, parents, building that trust. We are building community with lots of partners in our area, also with that small staff. So I always say I know this is cliche, but we're small but mighty staff. So we're very lean to start with. We will continue to do our mission-centric work. We are going to have some hard decisions to what are the things that we're getting less impact out of right now that we can let go so we can free up more time to do a long-term, long-range fundraising project that will help us with long-term fiscal sustainability. So those are the kind of conversations that we're having in Amarillo.
Corey, I mean, I would imagine you're taking over this executive editor position in September. I would imagine even if it weren't for these cuts, probably part of your job and assignment would be thinking about what does a public radio station look like in the future, right? I mean, there are things that are challenging all media, particularly, fewer people listening to radio over the airwaves or watching TV over the airwaves, right? Challenges with the internet. I mean, I think that there's a question to be asked about, do you want to be funded by the government in a world where the government might use that leverage to try to influence coverage and everything like that? I mean, how do you think this moment should shape how these news outlets, these organizations think about the future and how they should be kind of setting themselves up for the future?
Yeah, so at KUT, for example, 90% of the budget is already from individuals and businesses in our community. And so we're going to need more support from those groups, right? And to Luis's point from before, these are public media organizations now, right? Like we're not just radio stations. And so some of the things I'm excited to dive into are, breaking news. How can we tell these stories very quickly? Digital news, how can we tell stories on all different platforms, including the digital platforms on our websites, the email newsletters, social media, all of that. And really investing in investigative journalism and accountability reporting. And this is something our audiences really want, and we know that. Some of our journalists are doing great work in this area. We have at the Texas Newsroom an investigative reporting team that includes Lauren McGaughy, who's based here in Austin at KUT. She's currently investigating Elon Musk's impact on Texas. She also did some excellent reporting on prison heat. You may know that a lot of the prisons here in Texas are not air conditioned, and that is a big health problem for people. So we're going to invest in this work that really makes an impact and makes a difference. And we're going to need help from the community. And we appreciate everyone who's stepped up so far. And we have seen that. We really have seen people stepping up.
Luis, maybe this is a hard question to ask you because you're not going to be the decider on this, but should public media be trying to get this money back from the federal government, or is it time to sort of move on and think about different ways of doing this?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask that because it's so out of our control, right? So I would tell you that we've tried to move on. Not because the federal funding wasn't important, so don't get me wrong, but I think that dwelling on that is not the best use of our time. So I'd like our teams in Texas to all really think about the future and what does the future of public media look like, right? We always use the analogy if we were to start from scratch today, would we look the way we look right now? And the answer typically is probably not. We'd probably look a little bit different. So that's the way we're trying to reimagine ourselves. I mean, we really got to lean into digital in a big way. We need more people to discover the amazing content that we produce. You know, I wish that all of our other 8 colleagues were up here because, you know, whether it's El Paso, Corpus Christi, Midland, Odessa, I mean, every single one of our markets and stations has something amazing to offer, which is why we've created this Texas PBS as a collaborative of content distribution, because we had so much content coming out of, you know, the smallest of corners of our state. You know, there's still parts of our state that don't have any public media. Think of the Rio Grande Valley is a complete desert. There's no NPR or PBS station down there. And think about how important that part of our, or that region within the state is. So we have a lot of work to do to try and make sure that we cover the entire state, that we get the content out there that people are really looking forward to, and that we continue to produce content that really elevates the spirits, that informs and inspires. You know, one of the things that we always promote is whenever we get asked the question about, you know, what are some of the things that you're most proud of, we should all feel proud that Austin City Limits, a show that is produced right here out of this town, has survived 50 years. 50 years of potential federal cuts, 50 years of ups and downs in the economy, 50 years of celebrating music, arts, culture, and really all thanks to the public and the public media support. So I think we have so much to celebrate and so much to offer. We just need more people to really discover it.
Julie, Corey, I wonder if this was a federal issue. There were also conversations at the state level this year. There was a bill that would have banned universities and colleges, both of which are, you know, support y'all's entities, from, you know, supporting nonprofit media. That bill failed. There was, and obviously, well, I mean, the legislature's in session, but it's unlikely to come back up and for a while now. I mean, do you worry a little bit about like a trickle-down effect or the impact of possibly losing state support as well?
Great question. So Panhandle PBS, the license at Panhandle PBS is held by Amarillo College, which is a community college in Amarillo. So it's very personal to us. I was very aware of that conversation. I was able to make a trip to Austin at that time and talk with our lawmakers about the importance of the support that we have from Amarillo College. We've got a number of, I think the numbers that we said at the time that bill was under consideration is that half of the 10 stations in the PBS stations in the state of Texas are connected to colleges and universities. So yes, it's definitely something that we always watch. But I believe it is like everything in the world, it's all about relationship building. And so I think we don't wait for a bill to come up in the legislature or in Congress for us to tell the story of the worth that we're providing in our communities, because when you develop those relationships and you have folks who understand the impact of what we're doing, that you're starting on a more solid foundation to be able to fight against these kinds of things. And then to your previous question, you know, I feel like although, again, this is not the outcome that we wanted, it's not the one I asked for, I think this is a moment for us to grow and become stronger, because I think, you know, in the increasingly politically polarized environment that we live in, it's good for stations to be as independent as possible. The public side of the equation has always been to kind of undergird the journalistic integrity, the commitment to being unbiased and being accessible to all. So anybody who's spent a day in public media, those values are very ingrained in our soul. And so, you know, even without the public side of public media, I think you can still depend on those values and commitments that to be there.
Okay, one last question. If I am a person who values that investigative reporting, or the you know, the 50 years of ACL, or the Daniel 30 minutes or 3 hours of Daniel Tiger, what can I be doing right now? How can I help? You know, I'm sure you can donate, right? Are there other things as well?
Well, thank you for asking. If you should donate to your local public media station, absolutely. So if you live here in Austin, you can go to KUT.org and click the donate button. I would also recommend that you donate to your local PBS station, which is Austin PBS here. But all around the state, there's opportunities to donate to your local station, and it really does make an impact. And here at KUT, you know, you're supporting that great news and information at KUT. We also have KUTX as part of our organization, which is all about musical discovery and just, I mean, I love the news, okay? But occasionally I need to listen to something else, and I listen to KUTX, and you hear all these amazing artists, and it's not like other radio stations. It's not like other music stations. You really get to discover some great artists. So when you give, it's really going to make a difference and allow us to be able to do this important and kind of enlightening work in our communities.
And Matthew, just one more quick. Come to our events also. So becoming a member and a donor is fantastic. You can also support the station, like Luis was saying. I know he's working on broadening the offerings for events and experiences that you can have, and I think that's something definitely to look forward to. But as far as Panhandle PBS and Amarillo, we are thrilled this fall in October. Lydia Bastianich will be coming to the Panhandle and hosting a dinner for us. So just supporting our events, coming to our fundraisers, and as you know, old school as this will sound, call the station, call your local station, and you know, we're real people who are there and answer the phones, and we'd love to hear from you. As much as we want to know what you need, we could also let you know, are there volunteer opportunities? Are there different ways that you can contribute beyond, you know, the obvious ones, which are obviously to donate, to come to the events, to support the station?
I'll just end with maybe a little bit different answer, but I agree with those two. They're very important. But also just be our advocates, be our champions out there, right? I think that can go so far when, you know, you're at a dinner conversation or a reception amongst friends and family, and they ask you about public media, and whether you're a supporter, hopefully you're all supporters, hopefully you're all advocates, is to really engage in a conversation. I tell our employees all the time, you know, check people when they tell you about, when they make these offhanded, off-the-cuff comments about, oh, I heard you guys are going away, or I heard your station's shutting down, or I heard this, or I heard that. Call them out on it, right? If they say, oh, well, I don't like NPR or PBS because of X, Y, Z, ask them, well, what did you see specifically? What show, what episode did you see, did you listen to, did you watch? Because we want to hear about it. I want to hear about it. I'll email the folks at Frontline or at NewsHour. They'd be happy to receive an email saying, we have this viewer who claims that something that you reported on was not factual, something that you reported on was too one-sided. I would say be our advocates and our champions, and be willing to have those tough conversations with the people that make these offhanded remarks with no substance, right? Because that happens every single day. And I think that's what bothers us the most, is when there's really nothing behind some of this commentary and some of the perception around what public media is or isn't. So be our champions.
Can I add one more thing since we were talking about events? KUT does have a great event coming up called AT Explained Live, and it's coming up at Bass, and you can get your tickets. And what this is a live journalism show on stage where we answer questions that Austinites have about Austin. Like a previous question was, why do sidewalks suddenly end in Austin? But anyway, it's really fun. You've been before,
It's a really
right?
great event. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so you can join us there, and that will help too.
All right, we will hand it off to Matt Ewalt, who has some audience questions.
We have a few questions submitted here. As a reminder, you can ask questions at texastribune.org/ask. That's texastribune.org/ask. I am so glad that AT Explained was mentioned here, because I also attended, and someone new to Austin, it was just as valuable. But there was an aspect of it that introduced and helped tell the stories of the staff that works there. And there's a question in here around issues of trust in institutions. And I'm wondering how else you all work to kind of humanize the work of an institution and being able to share that story with its members, or if nothing else, respond to some of those issues of trust and people thinking purely in terms of like an institution or bureaucracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think allowing the audience to get to know our journalists is a great way for them to understand that it's not a nameless, faceless entity, and that we're people who live in these communities and send our children to school here. And I was born in this town. You're also from here. So we're here telling these stories. I think you're referring to before, at the beginning of the AT Explain live show, we had a slideshow that was like fun facts, or you had to pick which was the true
Right.
the true fact about our staff members, and we have some really fun facts about the staff members. Like there's the head of our podcast, Elizabeth McQueen, an amazing member of our staff. She used to be in the band Asleep at the Wheel. So that's her fun fact. I mean, so there's a lot of things that we sort of tell people about the staff so that they can get to know us as people.
Of what I would call the attack on public media at the moment is a fundamental misunderstanding of how public media operates. And, certainly to your point, Louise, but also I think that, the real target was national PBS, and then the ones who are bearing the biggest brunt of the outcome are the stations, the local stations. So I think it's really important for folks to understand that what PBS, the national organization, does for us, the member stations, is they leverage content for us and handle the contract and rights side of things. They provide services. They run cabling into our stations so that we're able to broadcast and so forth. At each station in Amarillo, Texas, we make our decisions about what content goes out over our airwaves. So what PBS provides to us is kind of a catalog, in effect, of options. The things that are going to play in Austin may not be the things that my audience in Amarillo will resonate with. So, that, again, is part of the public contract of public media, is that it's media that's leveraged at the national level, yes, but the decisions are made at the local level, and that's really critical, I think, to trust with the audience, and I think people need to understand that.
Let me just jump on that, because that's such an important point. The other thing that is part of our mandate as community licensees, which we are, is we have a community advisory board made up of 30 members of the community. This is not our board of directors, which has fiduciary duty over the organization. But this community advisory board is critical to our listening about what types of stories we should be covering in what communities. So back to trust. One of the reasons that I think we have so much trust from the community is because they know that we are listening. right? In our particular case, we have a digital news product called Decibel, and we've actually been spending an entire year in the Runberg area. There is no local commercial news operation that is going to spend an entire year learning about communities like Runberg, which are so important and critical to Austinites, right? And we listen to the community, we listen to what are the questions, the concerns that come out of these communities. Our community advisory board is basically our sounding board, and it's many times thanks to them that we're able to produce and create the kind of content that is going to most resonate with our community.
I think that leads to our with the time we have, a last question that's building on Luis's point. You know, on top of needing to evolve and respond based on these cuts, you're also responding to a rapidly changing Texas and changing communities. You know, how do you work to engage, and how else do you work to listen and engage the communities you serve, and other examples like Luis just shared of that you can share?
So we are always looking to engage new and diverse audiences across the state on multiple platforms. So one of the things that the Texas Newsroom has done is we've started a newsletter called Oye Texas, which is specifically aimed at young Hispanic Texans. And that's a free email newsletter, comes out once a week. It has news and information about Texas. And we're always looking to reach new audiences. Luis mentioned there are no NPR or PBS stations in the Valley, but I have a reporter in the Valley today, a reporter, Anna Campbell, who grew up in the Valley. She's reporting there right now as part of a series we're doing on new laws in Texas. So we're really trying to get out there around the state and give both our current audiences who have come to really rely on us for decades and reach new audiences as well.
At Panhandle, we also have an advisory committee. Our governing body is the Board of Regents for the college that holds our license, and so we've got an advisory committee, so we speak with them. We talk with members of the community. We have some folks who bring their monthly donation into the station every month, so we literally will see them face to face. You also have to remember that, you know, in my viewing area, we have plenty of people who are still seeing us off of rabbit ears also, and so we've got a wide range of things to consider. But as an initiative that predates the defunding is that we've made a shift in 2025 toward a more audience-centric approach to how we determine our mix of content. And by that I mean, previously we would have had like content buckets. So we do arts and culture, we do history, so on and so on. So these days we've kind of flipped that, and we're looking to identify new segments of audience that we can engage with and develop and remain engaged with. The project title was The Rain We Keep. That was our documentary series that focuses on the Ogallala Aquifer and water conservation. And then we've spun out a digital series out of that called Sustain the Plains. So we were looking to identify folks in our area to whom sustainability issues are important and do a deep dive on this issue. And then we'll move forward with other issues of sustainability that are important to our highly agricultural dependent area. So that's definitely a big initiative to move to that audience-centric content model.
Okay, well, I think we are right at the end of our time. So thank you so much for taking out time of your, I know it's a very busy time for all of y'all, but it was a great conversation, and thank you for being here. And thank you to the audience as well.
Thanks
everyone.
You.